An extremely valuable tool to tackle crime, a remarkable triumph of science. But was it really envisaged that it would be deployed against children who might commit crimes in the future? Well, this week it emerged that kids as young as 10 were having DNA samples taken by police in Camden and stored in the national database. There's no reason to believe that it isn't happening elsewhere in London too. Bridget McFall looks at this further.
The Freedom of Information request found that in Camden there are over 3,000 young people on a national DNA database, and on average 360 more youngsters from the borough are added to it every year. This includes children as young as 10. Joe Shaw, who obtained the Freedom of Information request, is critical of such policing methods.
I think the police need to be explaining to the people of Camden what it is they're doing with this information, whether any of these children are being charged or convicted of any offence, or whether the information is just simply sitting on a police database for years at a time.
But the Met defends the use of a DNA database, even for children.
Young people do get involved in crime and are the victims of crime. And therefore we need a base of evidence, I think, on which to set a retention policy in terms of taking DNA, which balances the privacy of the individual as well as the needs of crime investigation.
In London, more than 900,000 people currently have their DNA profiles on the database, but it's unclear how many of these have been convicted of crimes. Under current laws, adults and children who have been arrested can have their DNA stored indefinitely by the police, whether convicted with a crime or not. Last month, the Home Office drew up plans to amend the DNA database after the European Court of Human Rights ruled that such a policy of keeping profiles of innocent people indefinitely was illegal.
We have to have a balance between public protection and individual human rights, and we believe that the proposals that we brought forward provide that balance. It's a stepped approach whereby for the most serious offences the profiles will be kept, the samples will be destroyed, the profiles will be kept for 12 years, and for less serious offences 6 years. But for young people it's right that we give them the opportunity to come off the database at 18.
The Home Office is currently running a public consultation on the new proposals, but questions remain as to whether such a system, the largest of its kind in the world, helps clamp down on criminals or is an infringement of human liberties.
Bridget McFall reporting there. Joining me here at City Hall, Jill Sayward, who was a victim in a notorious rape case more than 2 decades ago now and is now a campaigner in this area, and Shami Chakrabarti from the pressure group Liberty. Let's start with you. What concern? We know that we've got a snapshot in one borough. No reason to think that it might not be going on in other boroughs. What are police doing here?
Well, I think the worry about Camden or that story is that because the law has allowed a fudge in recent years without any proper public debate, we've allowed a situation where the police can actually arrest kids for the purpose of stockpiling their DNA for the future. Now, whichever side of the debate we are about whose DNA should be kept, I think we can agree that it shouldn't be up to the police to make the law for themselves and run around arresting kids only because they want to stockpile their DNA.
And let's just explain that. We're saying only because, not that they're doing it as a corollary of having arrested a child for something where, what, you're saying there might be a legitimacy, or well, even that, but that they may actually be going to target those individuals they believe may do it in the future. So let's get him now.
Well, this is the worrying grey area, because there are anonymous policemen quoted in the newspapers saying, yes, it's true, we are basically going after these kids in order to use the DNA in the future, and that's very worrying, and that is what the current fudged law has allowed, the building up of a universal DNA database, not because people like Jill believe in it and want to argue for it honestly, but because the government didn't have the courage of its convictions and it allowed the police to do this by stealth.
What they're trying to say now, given there has been a certain amount of concern in the government, Jill, but what do you say about that? That we're somehow, looking around at a group of potential criminals in the future. Let's see if we can insure against it now.
I mean, I have to agree that I think that in a sense is quite worrying. I think that you should only be arresting people who you seriously believe have committed crimes, and we shouldn't just be targeting people because of where they live. We have to have a reason to have that DNA at the moment. I mean, yes, ideally I would like to have a universal database, but that isn't going to happen in the short term. And again, we have to be realistic about that.
From prints taken from birth, you'd like that, would you?
I would like DNA taken at birth, yes, and that everybody would be on there. I think it would act as a deterrent to crime, which we don't have at the moment. I think it would help solve a lot of crime. It would help clear up a lot of crime where people aren't guilty of the things that they're accused of, and it would stop a lot of pain for a lot of people.
What's the evidence, though, I wonder, with it? Because even with this advance of technology and DNA, it's hardly as if we've seen rape convictions going up in the capital. They've been going the other way.
Well, I think, one of the things that you have to look at, and realistically, when you're talking about rape in the capital, is it's been quite clear recently that the Metropolitan Police have not been acting very well, and they haven't been dealing with cases properly at all. So in terms of that, I think, you have to be very clear about that there's a lack of policing going on at the same time. And one of the other things that you have to be very clear of is that a lot of rape cases are boil down to the issue of consent. Yep. So we've got a different issue in that respect.
Yes, where DNA doesn't help. Just let me do it. How far the government? Yes.
Credit to Jill. Where she and I agree is that we know that DNA can be really valuable evidence, but we also know that it's most valuable in terms of sexual and violent offences. So given that there isn't going to be a universal DNA database, and I happen to be against one because I think it would be disproportionate and an administrative nightmare, given there isn't going to be one, let's have a rational debate about which DNA is relevant.
What would have been wrong? Someone, a 15-year-old is arrested but doesn't get convicted of a burglary or theft or even a sexual offence of some sort. What's wrong with keeping that DNA forever? At 15, arguably they might have known what they were doing or not.
Because somebody who's been arrested and either not charged or acquitted is innocent. And kids are arrested for things like being on demonstrations.
But it's just a sample that's sitting in a laboratory which may come into play if they do it again.
Firstly, DNA is really intimate material. It doesn't just say who you are, but it says a lot of stuff about you, your health profile, all sorts of other things that you didn't even know yourself. Secondly, a kid that is arrested but never charged, let alone convicted of anything, is no more likely in the future to be a murderer or a rapist than you or me.
But is that true? Is that true?
Yes,
someone
that is
who's
true.
been responsible for petty crime.
No, hang on.
At 14 for petty
arrested.
crime. For 14,
You said a kid that's been arrested. Let's go back to basics and make a distinction between someone who's been arrested but is let go in many cases almost immediately, and someone at the other end of the scale who's been convicted
Can you
of
see
a
the problem there, Jill?
sexual or violent
Even if you
offence.
think the technology has helped, there's a bigger price here we don't really want to pay, is there?
I think that what I have to come back to is the fact that in this country we have no deterrent for crime whatsoever. People who are arrested are often found not guilty. That doesn't mean to say that they didn't actually commit the crime.
But you can't use DNA in the hope that might happen. We think we've got someone, but the legal system let him down.
You can't use
What message would that give to police?
But what I'm saying is that we say, burglary or robbery isn't a particularly serious crime. I would say that it has a very, very big impact.
No, I would say it
people.
was, but I'm saying about why we keep a huge
information.
database without the controls on it for people that are never convicted.
Two things. If you're arrested of anything, nobody has a problem with taking your DNA and matching it to all known crime scenes. So you could be arrested of anything, and that is a very, very good way to help clean up crime. But if you're then subsequently not charged or convicted, it is just not proportionate or fair to keep your DNA as opposed to other innocent people's DNA.
Okay, just a final word for Jill Saylor. We're going to have a final word on this.
Well, I would say this would be one of the reasons for having the universal database, that we don't have to say we've picked on you and we haven't picked on your neighbour. It wouldn't be a case of picking on everybody.
Sorry, I have to end it there. To both of you, thanks very much indeed.